Greetings and welcome to another Pokemon 2019 or Pokemon Journeys anime episode review. This time I'm talking about episode 120, so let's get to it. Episode 120 begins in the Eevee Evolution Lab. Now I do want to point out that it's cool that we see that there are multiple Eevee here and, very likely, multiple evolutions as well. Which yeah, makes sense, given that this is the Eevee Evolution Lab, but the last time we saw this place was back in episode 49, and back then, we only saw Chloe's Eevee and one of each evolution. So Chloe and her Eevee are here at the lab because Eevee is having a medical checkup. Pinery informs Chloe that everything is in order, that Eevee is the very picture of health. Chloe and Eevee are both very happy to hear this. Pinery then wonders what Chloe and Eevee have been doing lately. Chloe says that they went to Alola to meet an Eevee belonging to their friend Lana. They do show a flashback of this. Chloe says that she learned something from Lana, that Eevee has a lot of possibilities. Pinery smiles and lovingly says that Chloe is right. Chloe then says that they also met a Sylveon and that they even participated in a contest together, where Eevee used Fairy Wind. They also show a flashback of this. Pinery says, Fairy Wind, huh? She also says that she wishes that she could have seen Chloe and Eevee perform. Now considering that Go was watching the contest on his phone, which means that the contest was being live streamed, I imagine that you could probably find the entire live stream of the contest online. So Pinery should be able to see Chloe and Eevee's performance. Also at this point I thought that Chloe would tell Pinery about all the evolutions she and Eevee met, which means that we would get a flashback of all these meetings. I was ready to get frustrated here, because this episode was preceded by a recap episode focused on Chloe and Eevee. Therefore, showing us a bunch of flashbacks in episode 120 as well would be incredibly lazy and just plain horrible. Thankfully, this does not happen. Chloe only talks about meeting Sylveon and another Eevee, though this is still 2 flashbacks too many, since ideally, they should not have shown us any flashbacks. Also, I do wonder why out of 9 encounters, Chloe chose to mention only 2, and I did wonder why she picked these 2 specifically. Also, I do want to say that I love that when Pinery says that she wishes that she could have seen Chloe and Eevee perform, Eevee adorably scratches her face with one of her paws, and she is then like, yeah, you should have seen how awesome we were. So Pinery then says that Chloe and Eevee met the 8 evolutions, so they met all of Eevee's evolved forms. Pinery wonders if Eevee showed an interest in any of them. Now this shows that Pinery knows that Chloe and Eevee met all the evolutions, even though Chloe only told her about 2. I did find this to be curious and I did wonder what's going on here. But while rewatching the episode for this review, I remembered that a medical checkup is something you do periodically, meaning that this should not be the first time that Chloe brings Eevee to the lab for a checkup. Therefore, Chloe has had more chances to tell Pinery about what she and Eevee have been doing, considering that Chloe told Pinery about meeting Sylveon and another Eevee, which happened last and most recently. It's possible that during previous checkups, which happened off-screen, Chloe told Pinery about meeting the other evolutions. This explains why in this episode, Chloe only told Pinery about meeting Sylveon and another Eevee, and why despite this, Pinery still knows that Chloe and Eevee met all the other evolutions. Meeting Serena and Sylveon and meeting Lana and Sandy likely happened after the previous checkup, which is why Chloe had to give Pinery an update and why Pinery wanted to know what Chloe and Eevee have been up to lately, meaning what they have done since the previous checkup. I think that it is rather clever how they were able to tell us, subliminally basically, that Chloe has been bringing Eevee to the lab for medical checkups off screen, and that Chloe has kept Pinery appraised of everything she and Eevee have done. But while this is clever, I still cannot forgive the unnecessary flashbacks. So Chloe says that Eevee showed an interest in all her evolutions and that it looks like she could not choose between them. Pinery says, I see, while sounding disappointed. Though she says this off screen since they zoom in on Eevee instead. It's clear that Pinery was hoping that Eevee was interested in one specific evolution, which is not the case, which is why Pinery is disappointed. I love that Eevee looks around all innocent like, what? Are you talking about me? Now I do want to mention that I think that Pinery looks different in this episode. When you look at what she looked like in episode 49, you can tell that something is different here in episode 120. Her eyes do look wider, sharper, and bigger now, which makes her look more intense. She no longer looks like a laid-back scientist with a calm demeanor. She also has more lipstick now, which gives her appearance even more impact. So the episode cuts to Chloe's room, where Chloe looks at all the things that she received from the Eevee/Evolution trainers that she and Eevee met. It is revealed here that Chloe also got something from Lana. She received what appears to be a picture or a postcard of a sunset, and a lowland sunset most likely. This was not shown in episode 112, and despite being aware of the trend that Chloe would always get a gift at the end of an Eevee/Evolution episode, I did not find it strange that Lana did not give anything to Chloe. In fact, I totally forgot about this trend while watching and reviewing episode 112. Likely because Lana has an Eevee and not an evolution. I have to say that it is nice that the trend was continued with Lana as well, even if it happened off screen. Also, it's cool that once again, they let us know of something that happened off screen without directly telling us. So Chloe looks at all the things she received while recalling the trainers and or Pokemon that she met when she got the gift in question. Clearly after talking to Pinery, Chloe realized that she and Eevee will soon have to make a decision, since they have already met all the evolutions and another Eevee. All the cards are now on the table, so all they can do now is weigh their options and choose one. Chloe's little brother Parker then enters the room to inform Chloe that dinner is ready. The episode then cuts to the dining room where the entire family sits down to eat dinner together. Chloe soon turns to Professor Cerise, wondering why Pokemon evolve. This shocks Professor Cerise and Chloe's mother Talia. I guess that they are surprised because Chloe is asking a Pokemon related question, which is unusual. Chloe goes on to say that humans evolve by growing older little by little and by growing up slowly little by little. But Pokemon evolution is completely different. Parker says that Pokemon just wanted to get stronger. Talia and Professor Cerise agree with this. Chloe then says that the more she thinks about evolution, the less sure she is about whether Eevee wants to evolve or stay as an Eevee. Upon hearing all of this, Professor Cerise exclaims in delight, with sparkles in his eyes and around him, "Amazing! You really are having great experiences alongside Eevee." Annoyed, Chloe says, "Don't tease me." Professor Cerise apologizes and he says that the question why exactly do Pokemon evolve is something that even Pokemon professors consider an age-old question. This surprises Chloe. Professor Cerise goes on to say that taken to the extreme, you could say that there are as many reasons to evolve as there are Pokemon. I do think that this is an exaggeration. Chloe is even more surprised when she hears this, to the point that she gets overly excited, though she soon dials down her energy and she is embarrassed by her sudden outburst. Professor Cerise says that each and every human being is one of a kind, a unique existence of their own, and this applies to Pokemon as well. Upon hearing this, Chloe is even more unsure of what to do. Professor Cerise then has an idea. He says to Chloe, "Why don't we go camping this weekend?" Talia is happy to hear this and she says that she would love to go camping since it's been a while since they last went out for a relaxing nature walk. Chloe meanwhile is surprised while Parker is also happy and he gets Chloe to say yes to the camping trip. The episode then cuts to the next day. Professor Cerise, Chloe, and Eevee are in the car, ready to go on the camping trip, while Talia, Parker, and Yamper stay behind. Yamper is not too happy about this. Now I was confused here since the preview for this episode clearly showed that everyone would go on the camping trip. So I did wonder what's going on. Talia soon reveals that Parker has to attend a soccer club, so she will stay behind with Yamper to accompany Parker. The three of them will then join Professor Cerise, Chloe, and Eevee at the camping site. Yamper refuses to stay behind, but after Parker tries to convince Yamper to stay, Yamper depressingly accepts. After saying a farewell for now and telling Yamper to look after Talia and Parker, Professor Cerise, Chloe, and Eevee depart. We soon see them driving around the city and on the highway as they make their way to the camping site. Relaxing music plays in the background during this, which really fits the spirit of this trip. Eventually, after some time on the road, Professor Cerise wonders if Chloe is awake. Chloe says that she is and she wonders if they have arrived at the camping site. But Professor Cerise says that he wants to stop by somewhere on the way. Said somewhere is a forest. Chloe exclaims that this forest is huge, and she wonders if this is the place her father wanted it to stop by. Professor Cerise confirms that this is the place. They all then walk through the forest. Professor Cerise says that there are a lot of Pokemon in this forest. They then do run into a bunch of Pokemon, including a Dugtrio that emerges from the ground, a group of Rattata that are running through the bushes, a couple of Doduo and a Dodrio running behind the bushes, a pair of Caterpie resting on trees, and a group of Butterfree flying around. Chloe excitedly says that Go would be really excited if he saw this forest. Professor Cerise adds that Ash would be excited as well. They do show Go and Ash's reactions as imagined by Chloe and Professor Cerise. This is the only appearance Ash and Go make in this episode. They do not appear physically, which is very unusual. In fact, if flashbacks are excluded, this is the second episode since his introduction in which Go does not appear, and the third episode in which Ash and Pikachu are absent. Also, if you exclude episode 119 of Journeys, which again was just a recap episode, episode 120 of Journeys is the first main series episode in which no main character appears physically. So, Chloe says that they should bring Ash and Go to this forest once Ash is done with the Masters Tournament and Go is done with Project Mew. Professor Cerise says that this is a good idea. Chloe, Professor Cerise, and Eevee then notice that there is something behind a nearby bush, so they decided to see what it is and they find a Poliwag that is adorably marching around. Chloe says that Poliwag is so cute. Professor Cerise says that Poliwag is walking towards the pond and that they should follow Poliwag. They all then proceed to do just this while ensuring that they walk slowly, so Poliwag does not realize that it is being followed. However, a leaf makes Eevee sneeze. This alerts Poliwag, who makes a run for it. But Eevee is not deterred by this. She runs after Poliwag, who tries its best to outrun Eevee. But it's no use. Even when Poliwag runs faster in desperation, Eevee still manages to keep up, which is pretty funny. Eventually, when they reach the pond, Poliwag, in frustration, uses Bubble Beam in an attempt to finally rid itself of Eevee. But despite taking a hit, Eevee gets back up and she gets right back to chasing Poliwag. Seeing no other way to escape Eevee's relentless pursuit, Poliwag jumps into the pond. Eevee does not notice this and she keeps up the chase. As a result of this, Eevee accidentally falls into the pond and she starts drowning. However, thankfully, an old man happens to be nearby, and he saves Eevee with a net. Professor Cerise and Chloe soon get to the pond as well, and they find the old man with Eevee in his net. Professor Cerise says, "I haven't seen you in a while, Mr. Enoki," revealing that he knows the old man. Chloe says to Mr. Enoki that is my Eevee you have there." So Mr. Enoki releases Eevee, who proceeds to dry herself by shaking. Chloe then pets Eevee while saying, "Oh Eevee." Now the sound of evolution plays here, and the glow of evolution is seen. Since I went into this episode believing that Eevee would evolve, I jumped out of my seat thinking that Eevee started to evolve here. Of course, Eevee would not evolve so randomly and in a moment such as this. It is also clear that Eevee is not glowing. But in the moment, I did not have time to really think about any of this. Instinctively, I just saw that something was evolving and I immediately thought that it was Eevee. Of course, it's not Eevee who is evolving here. Instead, the Poliwag from earlier is the one who is evolving. I guess that dealing with Eevee was good training. After evolving, Poliwhirl happily celebrates alongside its family. A Poliwrath, another Poliwhirl, and a Poliwag. Chloe is happy and surprised because Poliwag evolved. Professor Cerise then reveals that when he was young, he was under the care of Mr. Enoki several times, and that Mr. Enoki is the caretaker of this forest. Professor Cerise also mentions that Mr. Enoki helps him with his research. Chloe is surprised when she hears all of this. Mr. Enoki says that he does not do that much to help, and he says that it's nice to meet Chloe, who introduces herself, and she says that it's nice to meet Mr. Enoki. Now Mr. Enoki says, "Koharu Sakuragi, huh? That's a nice name." In Japanese, Koharu and Sakuragi are Chloe and Cerise respectively. So Mr. Enoki confirms that Sakuragi or Cerise is Professor Cerise's last name, and that Chloe has the same last name as she should. I now wonder if when this episode is available in English, Chloe will be referred to as Chloe Cerise. I imagine that this will be the case. So, Chloe is happy when she hears Mr. Enoki say that her name is nice. The episode then cuts to Mr. Enoki's house. Professor Cerise says, "You have grown this into a marvelous forest, Mr. Enoki." Mr. Enoki says thank you and that it took him a long time to do this. Chloe wonders if forests can grow. Mr. Enoki says yes, and he reveals that this forest was made by humans planting trees, and that when Professor Cerise was a kid, the trees had not grown this tall, and that the forest did not have so many different flowers. Chloe wonders if back then there weren't as many Pokemon in the forest. Mr. Enoki says that this is true. There weren't as many Pokemon as there are now. Professor Cerise says that despite this, the forest was like an enchanted forest when he was young. The episode then cuts to a flashback where Professor Cerise and Mr. Enoki, when they were younger, encounter a group of Bellsprout. Curious, Cerise looks for information about Bellsprout in a book, and the information he learns about makes him exclaim that Bellsprout are amazing. This makes Mr. Enoki say that Pokemon are indeed amazing, but that they are not the only amazing things, that humans and plants are also amazing. In response to this, Cerise says, "Am I amazing too?" And Mr. Enoki says yes, that just being alive is amazing all on its own. The episode then cuts back to the present, where Chloe says that her father went through experiences like that as well. Professor Cerise says that he did, but this was back when he was as small as Parker is now. Mr. Enoki adds that the time sure flies, because that same boy that would come to the forest often all those years ago is now a Pokemon professor. I do wanted to mention here that while it is not confirmed, I do think that Professor Cerise likely became a professor because of the days he spent in this forest under the care and guidance of Mr. Enoki. Mr. Enoki then says, "That reminds me, Cerise, one time you rescued a Clefairy, right?" Chloe says that she wants to hear about this as well, and Professor Cerise proceeds to tell the story of his encounter with Clefairy, which takes us to another flashback. One day, a young Cerise takes a leisurely stroll through the forest, until suddenly, an injured Clefairy emerges from the bushes in a panic. This startles Cerise. A Beedrill soon emerges from the bushes as well, revealing who injured Clefairy and who Clefairy is running away from in such a panic. Seeing Clefairy's plight, Cerise steps up to protect Clefairy using a stick to keep Beedrill away while telling Beedrill not to bully Clefairy. This proves to be intimidating enough to scare Beedrill away. After the Beedrill ordeal, Mr. Enoki tends to Clefairy's injury, while Cerise reads about Clefairy in his book. I love that Clefairy turns to Cerise while he is reading. I guess that Clefairy knows that Cerise is talking about it. Now Cerise does read something about Clefairy that will be crucial later in the episode, which is that happiness will come to those who see a gathering of Clefairy dancing under a full moon. Now Clefairy tries to stand up, but it can't with its injured leg. This is both adorable and heartbreaking. Mr. Enoki mentions that Clefairy usually live in the mountains, so this one might be lost. Cerise pets Clefairy while saying, "Are you lost? There, it'll be okay." We then see that Cerise would visit Clefairy every day. He and Mr. Enoki would help Clefairy with getting it to the point that it can walk again. And Cerise would give Clefairy flowers, which is adorable. Once Clefairy was able to walk again, Cerise would take strolls with Clefairy. One day, Cerise shows Clefairy a cherry blossom. Cerise says that cherry blossoms are pretty and that their name is just like his, which is why he loves them. Now it is worth noting that Sakura means cherry blossom in Japanese, which is why Cerise says that they are just like his name, which is Sakuragi in Japanese. It is worth noting, however, that Cerise means cherry, so the connection works in both languages. Upon hearing this, Clefairy smiles. Sometime after seeing the cherry blossom, or maybe on a different day, Clefairy wiggles its fingers and Cerise imitates Clefairy. They are soon approached by Mr. Enoki, who says that Clefairy is using metronome, and that you never know what move will come out of metronome, though he does not get to finish saying this last part, since metronome turns into thunder wave, which gives Cerise a good shock. This is pretty funny. Mr. Enoki finishes what he was saying about metronome, and he adds that he was going to tell Cerise to be careful. We then see Cerise and Clefairy just playing together, while Professor Cerise says that the days he spent with Clefairy were so much fun. He then says, but in the end, it was time to say goodbye, and the flashback cuts to the moment of said goodbye. After fully healing, Clefairy was ready to return to its home. Cerise embraces Clefairy while in tears because he does not want to say goodbye. He is sad because Clefairy is leaving. Clefairy then embraces Cerise back. This is such a touching moment. Seeing that Cerise is sad, Clefairy decides to cheer him up by using metronome, which becomes Petal Blizzard. Since Cerise loves cherry blossoms, he is delighted when he sees the Petal Blizzard. I have to say that it is fortunate and convenient that metronome, which turns into random moves, just so happens to turn into Petal Blizzard, which resembles the cherry blossoms Cerise loves so much. Cerise thanks Clefairy for the beautiful display and he turns around while saying this. But when he turns around, he realizes that Clefairy is already gone. This saddens Cerise, but Mr. Enoki reassures him by patting him on the shoulder and saying that Clefairy was likely saying thank you for everything. The flashback then ends. Back in the present, Mr. Enoki reiterates that Clefairy was saying thank you. Chloe, who was brought to tears by such an emotional story, says, after wiping her tears, that she wonders how that Clefairy is doing now. Professor Cerise says, who knows, but I hope it's doing well. Chloe exclaims that Clefairy has to be doing well, and Professor Cerise says that Chloe is right. Professor Cerise then says that he and Chloe should head to the campsite. Now I do want to say here, since we don't see Chloe and Professor Cerise saying goodbye to Mr. Enoki and we don't see Mr. Enoki again in this episode, that it was never explicitly stated what Mr. Enoki is to Professor Cerise. In my preview discussion for this episode, I said that he could be Professor Cerise's father, uncle, grandfather, father figure, or mentor, but neither of these is confirmed. But it is very likely that the last two are the ones that are true, because if Mr. Enoki was either of the first three, Professor Cerise would refer to him as such, and not as Mr. Enoki. So the episode then cuts to the campsite. In the evening, Chloe and Professor Cerise are finishing up cooking dinner and setting up the camp respectively. Talia, Parker, and Yamper soon arrive. The entire family then sits together to eat dinner. After dinner, they put away the dishes and the table they used for dinner. They play with some fireworks and then they all sit around the fireplace and they look at the moon. Eevee and Yamper soon hear something which catches their attention. Everyone but Professor Cerise wonders what's gotten into Eevee and Yamper. Professor Cerise, on the other hand, also hears something, and he does recognize the sound. He then excitedly exclaims that they might be incredibly lucky tonight. This surprises Chloe, Talia, and Parker. They all then walk through the forest, with Eevee and Yamper leading the way. Once they get closer to the source of the sound, Chloe says, "Those voices, Clefairy?" Professor Cerise confirms that Chloe is right. Talia says that there is a full moon tonight, so she did think that there was a chance that they could see some Clefairy. Professor Cerise then stops Eevee and he says that sometimes Clefairy gather and dance under the moon as part of an evolution ritual that also involves using moonstones. Talia says that there is an old legend that says that happiness comes to those who see Clefairy dance. This is what young Cerise read in his book. Professor Cerise says that this ritual is very important to the Clefairy, so they should watch it without disturbing them. This reveals why he stopped Eevee, who would have kept running until she inadvertently interrupted the ritual. So they all keep walking until they find the Clefairy and they all then hide behind a tree so that they can witness the ritual, which delights all of them, Eevee especially. At this point, I was eagerly waiting to see how Eevee would evolve and into what. Now the Clefairy are dancing while floating around a pile of moonstones. I have to say that this is very adorable, especially with the sound they make. Professor Cerise then notices that there is a Clefable as well. Now at this point I predicted that this Clefable is the same Clefairy Professor Cerise befriended in the past. Chloe smiles when she sees Clefable. However, this happiness is short-lived, because a group of Golbat soon interrupted the ritual. Talia and Parker are dejected when they see that the Golbat would attack in the middle of such an important ritual, while Chloe and Professor Cerise are both shocked, and they fear for the Clefairy and for Clefable. Clefable does fight back with Psychic, which allows it to easily dispatch several Golbat, since they are weak to Psychic type moves. But there are just too many Golbat and Clefable cannot take care of them all by itself. So Eevee decides to help. She stands next to Clefable and she uses Copycat to copy Psychic. Eevee then shows Chloe her intent to fight. Acknowledging this, Chloe calls for Psychic. Eevee and the Clefable then use Psychic together, which allows them to take care of the remaining Golbat. Now it's funny that there were so many Golbat initially, and Clefable only defeated a few of them. And yet, when Eevee and the Clefable fire off the double Psychic, there are only 4 Golbat remaining. So there is an inconsistency with the number of Golbat. Also, since at this point, I still thought that Eevee would evolve in this episode, seeing Eevee use Psychic made me think that Eevee would evolve into Espeon. And yes, I know it's nighttime, but I was and still am just grasping at anything that could hint at what will happen. And perhaps Eevee using a Psychic here is such a hint. So Clefable thanks Eevee, who likely says, "You're welcome" in response. After dancing some more, the Clefairy all evolve into Clefable, by coming into contact with the Moonstones. Chloe, Talia, Professor Cerise, and Parker are all amazed when they see this. Professor Cerise then thanks the initial Clefable for showing them the ritual. Clefable seemingly says, "You're welcome." At this point, I was really hoping that this Clefable is the Clefairy that Professor Cerise became friends with when he was young. The other Clefable then jump towards the moon and they vanish. I do want to mention that they skip in order to do this. Several Pokédex entries for Clefable state that Clefables skip around lightly, which makes it seem like they are flying. This moment perfectly illustrates this, which is cool. The initial Clefable stays behind to wiggle its fingers. Parker decides to imitate Clefable, much like young Cerise did with Clefairy. Chloe then also imitates Clefable and so does Talia. While initially reluctant to imitate Clefable, Professor Cerise ends up doing so after he sees that everyone else is imitating Clefable and that Clefable is indeed trying to get everyone to imitate it. This moment is pretty funny, especially because they all even imitate Clefable's voice. Eventually, Clefable ends up using a metronome, which turns into Petal Blizzard. Everyone is dazzled as they are showered by the petals. Professor Cerise soon realizes what Clefable using a Petal Blizzard via metronome means, but when he turns to Clefable, it turns out that Clefable is gone. So like in the past, Clefable once again seemingly scattered into the wind alongside the petals. Chloe then wonders if that Clefable was the same Clefairy her father befriended in the past. Professor Cerise says that yes, it was, which is not surprising whatsoever. But I am glad that this is the case. The episode then cuts back to the campsite, where Chloe sits on a chair. She fondly remembers the evolution of the Clefairy. Professor Cerise then exits the tent wondering if Chloe cannot sleep, which Chloe confirms is the case. Eevee also exits the tent because Professor Cerise accidentally woke her up. After lighting the campfire, Professor Cerise sits down to talk to Chloe, while Eevee sleeps on Chloe's lap, while being petted by Chloe. Chloe says that the Clefairy were beautiful when they evolved. They were beautiful, mysterious, and warm. Chloe says that she now understands what Professor Cerise said earlier, which is that there are as many kinds of evolution as there are Pokemon, and that each and every Pokemon is unique. Professor Cerise is happy because Chloe understands. Chloe then wonders if Professor Cerise is happy because he got to see that Clefairy again. Professor Cerise says that happy does not even begin to cover it. That experiencing a miracle like that really makes him want to make a world where people and Pokemon can cuddle up close and live happily together forever. Which is why he must keep up with his research. This conviction of his has been reaffirmed. Now Chloe has a big smile and she stares at Professor Cerise, who is confused by this. Chloe says that today there is something cool about her father. Professor Cerise is happy and surprised to hear this. And he says, "Really?" Chloe says that he is nothing like his usual self. This disappoints Professor Cerise since it means that his usual self is not cool. But he then says, "Oh well, as long as I am cool for today." Chloe then says that she wants to learn more about Pokemon evolution, and not just because of Eevee, though this is a big part of it. But right now she just wants to learn a lot more about Pokemon evolution. Professor Cerise says, "Then you can just start by walking, together with Eevee. Of course, there may still be many paths for you to choose from. If you reach a crossroad, just listen to your own feelings. Listen to them and choose your next path. After all, your possibilities are..." Chloe finishes the sentence by saying plenty, which is what Lana told her. But Professor Cerise says plenty does not cut it. Your possibilities are endless. This is part of the title of the episode, so it's fitting that this is said in such a dramatic way. Chloe smiles when she hears this and she reiterates our possibilities are endless. She did reiterate what Lana said in this same fashion. The episode ends with Chloe saying, Eevee, let's always be there for each other. So overall, I do think that this was a good episode, though I was initially disappointed with it, and I did think that it was an underwhelming episode. The reason for this is that I went into this episode thinking that Eevee would evolve, which of course did not happen. But then my disappointment went away when I realized two things. First, this was not really the right episode for Eevee to evolve. It was not a special or significant enough episode. Therefore, it would have been underwhelming if Eevee evolved in this episode. Second, I realized that it's fitting and nice that Chloe gets an episode to ponder what to evolve Eevee into and to contemplate what evolution means for a Pokemon. Chloe and Eevee meeting all the evolutions and another Eevee was them seeing, experiencing, and learning about all their options. Now that all the cards are on the table, they can make the most informed decision possible by evaluating each of the possible outcomes. But in order to really be able to make the best decision possible, Chloe also needs to understand what it means for a Pokemon to evolve. She needs to better understand Pokemon evolution. So this episode was about having Chloe learn that there is more to evolution than meets the eye. That evolution is not as simple as it looks. Because of this episode, Chloe now appreciates and understands evolution, which ensures that when the time comes to decide Eevee's fate, Chloe will be able to choose the best outcome, not only for her, but also for Eevee. Chloe also now wants to learn more about evolution, which means that not only will everything I just discussed be enhanced, but this also shows that Chloe really has matured and grown as a character. She is no longer the girl that had no interest in Pokemon. This episode really was a necessary stepping stone in Chloe's journey, and once I realized the true value and the purpose of this episode, and once I realized that this was not the episode for Eevee to evolve, I was able to appreciate and like this episode. Now with all that out of the way, I can talk about the episode more directly. It's great that Chloe's family got some time to shine. More specifically, her mother and her brother, who are rarely on screen. The scenes where the whole family was together were fun and sweet. It's nice that we learned more about Professor Cerise. We got to see some of the things that he experienced when he was young. Things that likely inspired him to become a professor. Things that fuel his passion for research to this day. And his bond with Clefairy was really adorable and touching. Finally, seeing Chloe grow to respect and appreciate her father more was really nice, since he really cares for her, but usually Chloe is pretty aloof with her father, so it's nice to see her be more loving with him, even if it's just for a moment. So yeah, overall, this was a nice episode and a nice change of pace from the norm, since Ash and Gold did not appear in this episode, not physically at least. Instead, the focus was completely on Chloe, who deserves more screen time, and on her family, who get very little screen time. I am now more excited than ever to see what will happen to Eevee, and I bet that we will probably get at least one more episode before the fateful conclusion. Said episode will allow Chloe to learn more about evolution before finally making her decision, which will hopefully lead to a very special finale. But that's the video. As always, leave your own thoughts down in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did and would like to see more like it, then please consider subscribing to my channel. I love Pokemon and I love making videos on both the anime and the games. Also, please consider clicking the links on screen so that you can check out more videos like this right away. Thank you very much for watching, and let's meet again in the next video.